Good evening, afternoon, night, morning, when you find a way to watch or listen to this podcast. It's me, Omar from Hardware, the Between the Stripes podcast network. And I'm back with a guest. And yes, Army and Navy fans can get along. We have mutually agreed to appear in this podcast for a topic about Navy. It's only kind of about Navy, but mostly in a bigger picture about their place in the college ball landscape conference wise with the American, as conference alignment seems to be in full swing again, as the Big Ten's playing risk. The Pac-12 is trying to recover what they have as they go through TV negotiations. And I'm joined by Sam Blevins of the Blue and Gold Report. Sam, I can give a little introduction and just any opening words.
I'm just happy to be here. It's really awesome. If you guys don't know, I run the Blue and Gold Report on Twitter. Go give it a follow if you don't follow me already. There'll be some good stuff coming out soon. But it's going to be an interesting year for the AAC. A lot of new teams, a lot of new faces. It'll be interesting to see how the football season will play out with these six new teams.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to talk about six new teams that are coming to the conference this year. If you know, last week, I think on Tuesday, the conference slate was released. Actually, the whole schedule, I should say, the whole schedule was released. Army plays a small part in that, of course, playing Navy, but also UTSA on Friday night. So, that'll be exciting. Hopefully, get some vacation days to go get to San Antonio for that one. See Army play in the Alamo Dome for once. But yeah, so just a very great podcast. Anytime we get to talk realignment, honestly, like you don't even have to prepare much. Everyone has their own approach to who they think is going to go to which conference and why. And I'm just excited to get into that.
Yeah, it's just there's a lot to unpack. Just saying that there's a lot more teams coming in than there were coming out.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess like to start off, what's your thoughts on the current situation with SMU being courted by the Pac-12? I mean, the Pac-12 at the moment, it's hard to tell without the TV negotiations, I guess without the TV contract finally negotiated, but the Pac-12 kind of looks like a better destination for SMU than the American. So what's your thoughts on that? Are you sad you're losing the Gans Trophy rivalry? Like most Navy fans, or
You know, we've had definitely some good games with SMU. I would hate to see them go. I think they're a good fit in the AAC. They're definitely a front runner right now, especially with Houston and Cincinnati leaving. I don't know if it's necessarily the best fit to go to the Pac-12, but if they leave, that's their decision. But I don't know. I think the AAC does have a good thing going. I don't think the Pac-12 necessarily knows what they want right now.
I agree. I think that's a good statement. And I'm not sure if I've seen anyone really say that the Pac-12 does not know what they want, honestly. And again, it's kind of confusing with these TV talks. I mean, in a sense, I like that they're being progressive and going towards Apple as a TV partner, because I do think that's the future of not just college sports streaming, but professional sports streaming. You look at NFL Sunday Ticket going to YouTube, and even like I think most of MLB is headed to streaming after, with all the RSNs being shut down. But I mean, then again, you also hear that about the Scripps Television Network. I guess all these local Ion stations. So that's something that I've yet to really hear about the Pac-12 not wanting what they want. I think honestly, I'm not as surprised, because I grew up playing, NCAA football 2K3 on the original Xbox,
Yeah.
and I grew up seeing, SMU in the WAC, and then wondering like, why that was. But I grew up like knowing that that was the thing that happened. That SMU regularly went to San Jose State, Fresno State, even Hawaii. So I mean, them going to the Pacific Northwest, Stanford, Cal. It's not going to be that much of a culture shock. Um, and even with the American, going to Temple, going to Florida schools, and Conference USA before that. So I mean, I don't think it's much of a shock. I just think ever since the fall of the Southwest Conference, SMU's kind of an odd man out. Well, ever since the Pony Express and then the fall of the Southwest Conference, SMU's been the odd team out. So that's just what I have to say about that. In terms of replacement, which will go on like much later, into much more into detail later on. Um, I don't think there's many Texas schools that you can like really replace SMU with. Not at the FBS level, and I don't think really at the FCS level either. So I mean, what are your thoughts on I guess any other Texas schools the American would court hypothetically?
I mean, you do have a good point. There's not really a Texas school that I could think of. Maybe UTEP, just because they are in Conference USA. You're pulling UTSA from there, and Conference USA, that group of five. Maybe Sam Houston State. Those are the two schools that I could see maybe fitting into the AAC, just in terms of the demographic that they want, and the athletic programs that they have. But for the most part, I don't think there really is that, one particular school that you go, yeah, that's a good replacement for SMU.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree. So, like I said, we'll talk later on. We'll talk more about realignment candidates. I think the American going to areas and states where and markets where they're not particularly present in is the best idea. But I know that you've prepared a sort of I guess sort of some research on the six schools entering the American this year, and a lot of those schools are appearing on Navy's schedule this year. So I'm gonna let you have at that, and intervene whenever you see fit.
Okay, I mean, just looking at the six new schools, really the two teams that have had success recently has been UAB and UTSA. UTSA had that year 2 years ago with Frank Harris and Sincere McCormick, where they only had one loss on the season. But the conference as a whole, I believe, has become weaker. You do lose some of that power five, or I guess power six is what the AAC wants to be called. When Houston and Cincy go to the Big 12, you don't really have those teams that can challenge the college football playoff. And in terms of the Navy schedule, it is weaker. It's weaker than it has been in the past. And, Navy did compete with Houston and Cincinnati a lot. But I think Navy does have a good chance to become bowl eligible this year. I know we have a new coach. I know there's a lot of uncertainty there, but I think the schedule this year is good for Brian Newberry's first year as head coach.
Yeah, and I mean, I do agree. I know there's some cool trips for Navy fans, some cool reminiscent trips. Like, well, the one that I noticed actually, when I say some, I just thought about one. The trip to Charlotte, the return trip with the 2006 Meineke Car Care Bowl. A long line of not just Navy heartbreakers, but just like Service Academy heartbreakers against Power Five teams and bowls. Yeah, our Army in the 2020 Liberty Bowl comes to mind. But yeah, like that one. But I mean, I think it's fun just seeing like all these big cities and just like seeing honestly, Naval Academy grads, of course, naval veterans are anywhere, especially in the South.
Yes.
Um, and so I mean, trips like to Birmingham in the future will be fun too. Even though I'm pretty sure there's like more of an Army presence, I guess Army veteran, active duty Army presence in like Georgia and Alabama. I'm sure there's like a lot of Navy guys, and even then for me, like I'm gonna try to see Air Force play Sam Houston State at NRG Stadium this
Oh
year, home
yeah.
of the Texans. And yeah, like I mean, it's not Army, but I'll be going to see Air Force. I can't really send this podcast who I'm rooting for. I don't want to anger anyone, but so it's just I think it's just good seeing them going to all these new cities. But I am getting sort of the energy of the 2013 Conference USA realignment, where instead of adding the best programs in the Group of Five to truly defend that Power Six branding, they just got markets like Conference USA did. So we'll see how it plays out. I am buying into the Sun Belt hype.
Yes.
Um, I mean, yeah, like yeah, it's no shot at the American. It's just a much more level playing field, honestly, for the New Year's Six. Like, it's only a matter of time before the conference other than the American goes to the New Year's Six.
Yes, Sun Belt, loaded. Being from North Carolina, App State is always in it. They call it the Fun Belt for a reason, and they have some good football programs that people need to be on the lookout for. I'm telling you, the Sun Belt is building a good reputation for good football.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just amazing to me too that like as recently as I think 2013 they had just two bowl tie-ins, and then here they are, the like pretty much the darling group of five conference. So it'll be exciting to see what happens with the Sun Belt in the coming years and that's sort of their titanic battles with with the American and the Mountain West too. The Mountain West is still a great player in the New Year's Six race. So going on instead of the or I guess going past like the members that have already joined the American Conference, uh who do you think? Do you have a list of candidates you think could replace SMU in the American? Because I got a few that comes to mind in no particular order.
Man, I don't know, but if we're gonna go based on markets, which is something that it looks like the AAC did, I think App State could be a fun team to join the American. Yeah, I think you have ECU and Eastern North Carolina and Greenville. I think it would be nice to have that rivalry against Appalachian State, a contrast between the western part of the state, eastern part of the state, and North Carolina. They are crazy about sports, and I think it would be a natural fit for App State to come in, and I think they'd be a contender right away for the AAC championship.
Yeah, I mean, so I thought about putting App State on my list too, because you mentioned the markets, but for me, it just didn't make sense to sort of like saturate in that market when you already had Charlotte. And much more importantly, like East Carolina looks like they're getting back to their Ruffin McNeil, their Patrick Pinkney days, from
Yep.
my childhood, David Garrard days, where they're really a force to be reckoned with, where they can beat not just any team in their conference, but any Power Five team too. So I mean especially with East Carolina getting back on track there. I didn't think App State was as viable an option. I think App State likes to be where they're at, especially if Coastal Carolina stays on the same trajectory, even
Yeah.
like Georgia Southern too, the new look Georgia Southern. So App State wasn't on my list. So the top of my list too, and a suggestion on Twitter from the tweet that I put before we recorded. UMass, I think UMass is great for a few reasons. I know I see you wins for a few reasons, and I'm not going to say basketball. I'm really not. Like UMass has a great basketball pedigree out of the Atlantic 10, but if you look at their statistics in terms of NCAA tournament appearances, like most of it, like the brunt of it was in the John Calipari era in the
Yes.
90s. Other than that, you just don't have much you have a one-off appearance from Travis Ford's teams in the 2010s and then a couple appearances in the 60s and 70s, but like not much without Calipari. So that's just what I'm gonna say there. But with UMass, it's not just the Boston market with UMass. It's not, and I'm not talking about the rotisserie chicken restaurant. It's not just the Boston market. It's like the same thing. I heard someone say, I forget how it was, but like they were talking about free agency in the NBA. It's like when you go to Boston, it's not just Boston that you become a star for. You become a star for like all of New England. Hence the New England Patriots. Like UMass has alums all over, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, I believe, and throughout the Northeast that want to see their team succeed. They want to see their team in a conference, in a reputable conference, with Navy, with maybe not SMU now, but I guess with a newly resurgent Tulane, with
Right.
USF who used to be in the Big East. I'm sure UMass fans would want that. They would bring sort of that presence of all of the New England market. I think not all of it, because of course Boston College still is a very heavy presence in that region, but a significant presence. Like it's not negligible. So I think they bring that. But in terms of football, I just have a hard time believing that um they'll be able to make, I guess, a quick ascent. There was moments last year where I liked what Don Brown was doing with
Yeah.
UMass. But it's such a tough job, and I wish him the best. Um, but I would like it more because you have the regional rivalries with Temple and then Navy. So
Yes.
I guess your thoughts on UMass replacing SMU in the American.
I don't know. UMass, I get the market. I do. I just don't know how competitive they would be. They haven't been good in football. Their basketball teams struggle. You you want to build a conference to where you have competitive teams. Basketball's definitely going to struggle. Navy's a football only member in the AAC. So I guess for me, just coming from the football side, why would I want UMass? They're not very good. You want to be able to have a better strength of schedule. UMass would bring that down. But if we're just going to talk about the AAC as a whole, I don't know if UMass would necessarily be the right fit. I think it would be interesting. I think the fan base could get behind it. I know Temple says they're Philadelphia's team. I think that UMass could say, we're the team of the state, even though they kind of stink. But I don't know if UMass would fit, but I'd be interested to see if they ever did come to the AAC, if maybe their athletic programs are revived somehow.
Well, I mean, like I get the competition, but you wouldn't like the regional rivalry aspect because your opinion as a Navy fan, who is Navy's biggest rival in the American?
Wow. That is a good question. I don't really know because we have Air Force and Army. I don't know, when every time we play an American opponent, I don't really feel any, huge animosity. Maybe Temple just because geographically they're near us. UCF because they always give us, a scrap, and Florida's got a whole bunch of naval grads down there. But I mean, just the geographical aspect, I think the AAC is okay up there. I think adding one more team may help, but for the most part, in terms of the Navy opinion, geographics doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. I get that. And what you guys are experiencing, with Navy is what Army experienced, from the late '90s to the 2000s. I don't mean that to rub anything in, but it's like it's a fit for sure. And back then, having an automatic bowl tie-in, when there was less bowls, and there was about like 25 bowls, or
Yeah,
I think even less when Army joined Conference USA, to now access to the New Year's Six and access, like more access to the playoff. Like Army might have to, start thinking about joining a conference too with the playoff format, the way that the playoff is with six conferences, and then no, and then
just come on to the
no.
AAC. We'd love to have you.
No, I want to keep Army Navy as a standalone game. So that does sound enticing, but that's my preference. Army Navy being a standalone game, and
Yes.
just having that attention still. So yeah, I mean, I like this discussion for sure. UMass, I guess, my second choice. In terms, I guess I'll go to your second choice, Sam, instead of mine. Sorry about that.
No, 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 you're good. I mean, for me, just thinking as a whole, you mentioned Coastal Carolina. They like the Sun Belt. I think it'd be interesting. I think they would compete on all levels in the AAC. They've had pretty good basketball program in the past with Cliff Ellis leading them to the NCAA tournament multiple times. Good football program. I'll be very interested to see how Tim Beck does as a head coach. Someone who graduated from NC State and watches NC State football all the time. I know I was very happy to see Tim Beck go because I did not like his offense whatsoever. That's just me. But I would have said Coastal. I really think if you just look at it, they have everything in place. They're going to expand their football stadium. They're expanding athletics as a whole. I think they're enticing just because they are growing in brand and reputation.
I agree. I do agree with that. I'm just not sure whether I think we'd have to wait a couple years to see whether the Coastal Carolina rise was all because of, Grace McCall, Teddy Gallagher, guys like that, and of course
Yep.
Jamie Chadwell, or whether it's just a consistent program there. So I think the verdict's too soon to tell whether Coastal Carolina will be a Sun Belt power, because you saw chinks in the armor when Grayson McCall, was out. It was, or it wasn't during the season. I think against
Yes.
James Madison, McCall was out, and then of course in the Birmingham Bowl against the East
There's another.
Carolina.
There's
So,
another one you just mentioned, James Madison.
oh
They're
yeah, yeah.
they're low key. They're really good in basketball and football. I think they could fit in the AAC very well.
I do agree. Yeah, I mean James Madison is getting better. And again though, I think James Madison's like found a great thing too. I mean, with them in their first year contending with the Sun Belt, for the Sun Belt title. So again, that's a tough one. That really is a tough one right there. But yeah, just great potential for a market there. I don't think the American is in Virginia either, too. So
Hmm.
that one makes a lot of sense for sure. And of course, you have I was gonna say Charlotte as a rival, but they weren't in the CAA as football
No.
members or ever. So Um, yeah. So I guess my second school that I had ranked was I had Georgia State into going into the Atlanta market. And this is a school.
Okay.
Was that one of your schools or?
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think that could be a market that could be tapped in and definitely help the AAC out.
Yeah, and it's a growing school. Like I don't have their enrollment numbers right with me right now. I'm looking them up as we speak. But I know they have a growing undergraduate population. They're in the heart of Atlanta. So they have 33,000 undergraduate and graduate students at their main campus. So this is a growing program. They're playing in Atlanta. It's just hard really with Georgia to really compete in that market, but it's still presence in Atlanta.
Yep.
Um, I mean, I just think the thing is, I think Georgia is a very crowded market, and I think that's what a lot of the programs in the American face, where it's like, yes, they're in the cities themselves, but the city's already crowded. They're already crowded with the established powers, and I think that's the problem with Georgia State, even though Georgia State's emerging for sure as a program.
Yeah. You know, you can't beat Georgia. You're not going to beat Georgia. If you're Georgia State, you're not going to beat Georgia, but you can get some of those guys that, maybe wanted to go to Georgia. Then you realize, I'm not getting playing time. If I just go a little ways down the road, I can play some good ball at Georgia State. I think it's definitely a viable option.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, with that talent too, with that transfer talent, I mean, you could go places with it. And I think much more closer than, comparing to Georgia Tech having trouble in the ACC.
Yep.
I definitely think there is room for Georgia State to sort of grow, as a brand. But even then, I don't think they'd overtake Georgia Tech. You know. So again, there's a lot of what if, but there's a lot of putting your foot in the market, but not really having a hold of it.
Right.
But Georgia State is just fascinating though because in some intent, like for like, I guess in some ways it kind of do resemble UCF, where like UCF, a large student base in a very in a crowded state. I mean, when UCF was coming up, of course, is Florida State, Miami, even
Oh,
you know, all there, all with heavy presences, and like UCF just emerged and played ball. So maybe if like Georgia can, if I guess the American or the Sun Belt we're already at, you know would be sort of that kind of launch pad to like have a UCF like rise. But I can honestly see Georgia State taking a UCF like rise and then us maybe revisiting this conversation a couple years down the road if the
yeah.
American does take a chance.
I think, the AAC keeps on expanding like, they just did, adding 6 teams. I think if you add two more, you'd have a pretty good sized conference. You'd have a lot of, variety in terms of geography and in terms of talent. I think Georgia State should be near the top of the list, especially in the state of Georgia. I know there's Georgia Southern. That's an interesting dynamic, but I think Georgia State, if you're looking to get in a big market, is the way to go.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. Do you have another school that you had sort of on your list or
No, Coastal Carolina and Appalachian State. When you mentioned Georgia State, I know they were, kind of the honorable mention. Something to explore. Those are really my three.
yeah, so I had a couple more as well. I wanted to go into the MAC a little bit
Okay.
with my candidates. So Buffalo, going back into the Northeast. Buffalo is a school that has been like talked about, I guess originally with the domino that started everything with the realignment, Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC. They were mentioned a little
Yep.
bit, and Buffalo is fascinating in a few ways because not just are they in Buffalo and upstate New York, in honestly a market that's kind of a market for Syracuse that's kind of decreasing because Syracuse is in the decline in basketball. At least in football
Yes.
they had their best season in almost I think in 4 years
Yep.
this year. But it was a 6-6 year. They faded down the stretch. I do think that Syracuse is on the right track, but I don't know if Syracuse will compete for conference titles in the ACC in football. Basketball, it looks like Jim Boeheim's time is kind of up. So, an emerging university there, and everyone always talks about academics. Buffalo is a part of the American or the Association of American Universities, a prestigious. I had to do some research because I heard it thrown around a couple times, but a prestigious alliance of research universities like Georgia State. They have a huge student base, 22,000 undergraduates, 10,000 postgraduates. Again, like I think this is kind of a more fascinating one because with Buffalo, you'd have them traveling down to Oklahoma. I think Buffalo's fine just where they're at in the MAC.
Right.
Having to travel to the Midwest, at most, Northern Illinois or Ball State, then they'd have to travel to not just Tulsa, but to Texas, to USF, and then FIU or sorry FAU. So, thoughts on Buffalo?
You know, I think that's a little far out there. I don't know if that would exactly work. I know we're the American Conference, and that encompasses America. But just in terms of travel, I don't know how that would fit. I don't know exactly how they would fit into the whole scheme of the conference. But I'm always up for anything. I mean, I've learned at this point the SEC has, Texas, and I don't think Texas is necessarily southeast. And then you have the Big Ten, which I've always thought is up north. Now they have UCLA and USC. So it seems like geography at this point is out the window. So you know what? Why not?
Yeah, I mean they bring lots to the table, and again, regional rivalries for sure. Temple, former MAC conference mates with Temple. On the Navy, I don't think Navy's ever met Buffalo before, but again, you have a matchup with Lambert Trophy implications, something that's rare nowadays, sadly. Um, but Buffalo does bring a lot to the table. I just think the MAC is just it's just such a cozy place to be for all the schools there. And
Yeah.
frankly, I would love to see Army join the MAC too, to get access, to get the possibility of being in the playoff. But that's another podcast for another time. So another time, my friend Brigade Review, my friend James
Oh
from Brigade Review.
yes.
But good friend. I had class with him actually at the academy, so
Oh,
goes beyond podcasting. So I guess so going on to my last school. I think this was my last school. My last school being Northern Illinois, and again another school in the MAC. And this one, I think so with the MAC schools, I will say this before I go into Northern Illinois. I think the MAC provides a lot of room for I think it's the most fascinating domino if they were to pick a school from the MAC, because you look at the MAC, who would they get? They would probably get maybe Delaware. I think Delaware is very tired. Honestly, frankly, I think all the schools that are in the CAA are very tired of being in the CAA because of what they keep doing with their media deals. They keep going with Flow Sports, and it's hurting their recruiting, is hurting their accessibility for their athletes. Because I'm not paying $30 a month for Flow Sports on top of YouTube
yeah.
TV just to watch a game that might be on one of my two screens. I'm not gonna do it.
Right.
Um, rather than being on ESPN Plus where everyone else is. It's just clear that in the CAA, the athletic directors aren't looking in the best interest of the student athletes.
No.
So Delaware might be tired. Delaware would kind of be like Buffalo in the MAC, would kind of be like, kind of an outlier, but not too outrageous. I can see the
Right.
MAC taking Buffalo, and then the CAA maybe takes Howard, because the CAA was this close to taking Howard and leaving the MEAC at 5 teams. So most interesting domino there if a MAC school were to leave. But Northern Illinois, it's fascinating to me because like everyone always overlooks them as if like they're not an hour away from Chicago, and because Chicago is like, I think it's like the third largest market, third or fourth. It's a top five TV market,
Yes.
and
Yep.
I mean it's worth like a lot more than a lot of schools that have their own spot in their own market. Like say like it's a lot more, I guess, than having a spot in the Chicago market or a presence in Chicago market is probably worth more than owning the Hattiesburg market, for your Southern Miss. And no disrespect to Southern Miss or the city of Hattiesburg. It's just Chicago, and it's just so big. Not
Yes.
just with like all the city itself, but with its surrounding suburbs. I mean, you have the Bears moving to Arlington Heights. So it's just like so much area, so much people to reach. Thoughts in Northern Illinois, as a replacement for SMU for the American?
And definitely in the football space, I definitely think they would have room in terms of we're looking at all the sports, if we're looking at the two big sports, basketball, it's a little saturated in the basketball market. You have Loyola Chicago, they've had success. They just moved into the A10, so they're getting a lot more money now. Then you have UIC in there. Then, I mean, you're looking at the other Illinois teams, Illinois State, Illinois. In terms of basketball, I don't know how much they're going to get from moving to the AAC. It may be good just to be able to try to compete with, the A10 being in that market. But in terms of football, I think it would be a good move. They've always been competitive in the MAC. They've made several championships. I know, man, 10 years ago, I think Jordan Lynch was a Heisman candidate with NIU, and Dave Doeren. I know he's the coach at NC State now, but he came from NIU. They really are a good football school. So I think definitely in terms of football, it may be a good move to add a team that competes in their conference every single year. I think it's definitely basketball where you're going to have to take a look and go, okay, are they going to offer us enough? Are they going to be able to compete in terms of bringing people in with Loyola Chicago and UIC and all those other teams? But like I said, I'd be fascinated by it.
I mean, for sure. I know Northern Illinois has not been as consistent recently, but I mean, this is a school that went to the Orange Bowl in 2013 or 2012, and then came close to doing it to going to another BCS Bowl in 2013. Like you mentioned, Jordan Lynch, who people just forgot about. Honestly,
Yep.
he's probably one of the most electric players in recent memory in college football. But it's just sad people forgot about him. But yeah, again, like I said, like and I keep repeating this. I mean, the Max cozy in this time in college sports. It's not a bad deal. You get exposure. You have to bend over backwards, for that exposure, but you get exposure still in the MAC. It's a fine place to be. It's really not a bad place to be for Buffalo or for Northern Illinois. So we'll see. Those that was my short list of schools. Looking another school that got mentioned on Twitter was West Virginia. Short answer to that, no.
No,
That
they're
was my
not.
friend
They
Josh.
will not leave. There's too much money there.
Yeah, shout out Josh Jones for that. I'm pretty sure it was a joke. So shout out for that joke. I mean, that's our discussion. Don't say that we don't listen to our Twitter people at the Between the Stripes podcast network. But yeah, I mean, okay, I did have a couple more, that kind of bring some market. Western Kentucky and Middle Tennessee. I just don't think there's enough of a presence in the national market for either to be really considered, honestly.
Definitely not Middle Tennessee State. Shout out to Murfreesboro. I've been there. It's actually a really nice little town, but I think where they're at now is where they need to be. I don't think they're ready for that move yet.
Yeah, I mean, Western Kentucky brings some intrigue basketball wise. Definitely a very consistent program in basketball. But again, like I just don't think the combination of market is there, and they haven't been as much of a excuse me, as much of a mid-major power to sort of warrant at-large talks when it comes to the tournament. So
Right.
I think yeah, any school that you want to expand basketball wise would have to be either so dominant in their conference like New Mexico State, have big wins over schools over the past few years,
Yeah.
or warrant talk to be an at large or like earn an at large bid. And Western Kentucky has come close, but they've still been overlooked. And like whether that's been because of Western Kentucky's merit as a team, I don't think it has. I think there's politics behind the scenes when it comes to the selection committee.
For
But
sure.
even then, it hurts their candidacy whether it's right or not. So yeah, that's all the candidates I had for American realignment. Do you have anything else, Sam?
Uh, I think we're going to go to the tournament since it's about to come up. You talked about, Western Kentucky. They've been a mid major. They've been good. I'm someone that loves mid majors. I love them dearly. I want to see more of them get into the tournament because there are some really good basketball teams that get overlooked. I think if you're looking at AAC realignment, you will definitely have to look more into basketball because you're losing the number one team in the nation. You're losing Houston, and that's going to take 3 or 4 solid teams just to replace that number one in the nation caliber team.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, it's just hard with the American too in terms of tournament time. I think the American looks like a one bid league from now on. I'm not sure. I mean, Florida Atlantic definitely brings some intrigue to the conference now. I saw them play
This
when they
year,
came to El
yeah.
Paso. Yeah, like that's a very solid team, but I have to see more. Kind of like with Coastal Carolina, I have to see more, like to see if they're here to stay. Honestly, I mean, just looking at that conference, I mean, there's Memphis, but who
Right.
who
Who
else?
else? You know?
Yeah, it's like who Wichita State has fallen hard times. I'm fascinated with Tulane. I think Tulane has a lot of potential basketball wise. I've always been a huge Ron Hunter fan. I
Oh
just
yeah.
love his charisma. I love his
Falling
receiver.
off the stool when his son hit the shot. Oh,
Yeah, falling
that's
off the
that's
stool like
passion.
last year, he was like dancing in front of the Tulane student section after beat Wichita State. Like it was just it's he's a great coach. I can tell players like love playing for him, but yeah, like it's just like who else in the American is sort of gonna bring that money in as a basketball power, and it's like kind of hard to find anyone else. Maybe the American takes sort of take I guess they do a one for one. They do a football only membership with UMass, and
Yep.
then they take a non-football playing school from who knows where, whether it be the American or somewhere. I sorry, not the American, the Atlantic 10, the Missouri Valley. It's just hard to see, there's just not many options to add without for the sake of adding. My bad, Sam.
All right.
Long-winded.
No, no, no. Okay. You said one football, just football, and then one just basketball. I like this because there's one team in the Missouri Valley that I have watched for several years. They're really good. They actually have a top 100 recruit, Tanner DeVries. His dad coaches the team. Drake. Drake
Oh
has been
wow, okay,
a
yeah.
great Drake has been a great basketball school for really a little while. The last 3 years, they've been overshadowed by Loyola Chicago, but Drake has consistently been in Arch Madness in the championship game. And this year, watch out in the tournament. They're going to make noise. But if you're looking for a basketball only school, I wouldn't look past Drake because their record has indicated the last 5 to 10 years that they can compete.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Drake for sure is on the rise. I saw them play actually on the day of the 2021 Army Navy game. I saw them when I was stationed in Georgia. I saw them playing Holiday Hoopsgiving in
Okay.
Atlanta. Made the 2 hour drive from Augusta to Atlanta, see them play Clemson. They're definitely a fascinating school. So I thought when you said basketball only, I thought you were gonna say St. Louis, because St. Louis market, but yeah, like Drake for sure. I think the thing with Drake though is like they're not a state university like Wichita
Right.
State. They're a private school. And it's like you keep and they do have a football team. It's not like they don't have a football team. They do have a football team
Right. They're just
and they play
not,
Pioneer League ball.
yeah.
Yeah, they play Pioneer League ball. So it would be very awkward to see like it's awkward to see it would be awkward to see Drake play basketball and Olympic sports. Should use the term Olympic sports rather than just basketball. Play Olympic sports in the American and the football teams just languishing in the Pioneer Football League. But that is very fascinating too because the Missouri Valley is definitely a great it's honestly just a great conference. I feel like
Yes.
it's lost its luster after losing Wichita State and then Loyola Chicago. But I always enjoy watching Missouri Valley schools whenever whenever they're in town for me. So
Yeah. Let me tell you, Arch Madness is this week. Trust me, on Sunday, CBS at 2 o'clock. I'm going to be watching the championship game. I just love Arch Madness. Missouri Valley is probably my favorite mid-major conference because there's so many good basketball teams. There's so many that you could choose from in terms of if you wanted to bring them into the AAC.
yeah, no, I agree. I mean, Missouri Valley for me is like my second favorite mid-major conference. I like the Atlantic 10 better because I went to a few A10 games, went to a few Fordham games when I was in college, just riding the train
Okay.
down to Rose Hill. So I just love the Atlantic 10s. They're in the shadow of the Big East and they're still just good programs. So
Yeah.
but yeah, just great mid-major programs in the Missouri Valley. And maybe one of them is good enough to warrant, I guess, it's like the Wichita State treatment from the American. Who knows? So many routes with conference realignment.
Yeah. I mean, There's so many choices, and it depends upon what the AAC wants. But for now, we just added 6 new teams, and I'm very interested to see how it shapes up in terms of all sports, really.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I think that's all I have, Sam. Do you have anything else to add? Anything else you want to plug before we head off?
I've really enjoyed talking to you. I love talking about sports. Um, can't wait to be on here again, and I'm just honored that you invited me to be on.
I mean, yeah, it's not that you invited. I forgot to mention at the beginning that you were on the podcast. People might have already turned off the podcast by this point, but you're on the podcast because you won the my bowl mania. So this is
Oh
your
yes.
award. But again, like I'm gonna have you back on later on in the spring/summer to talk Navy's schedule. Just games to look forward to, new rivalries, everything you name it with Navy's schedule. So I'm very excited to have you back on later on, Sam. But this is a fun discussion, and I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Course. And everyone, until next time, tune in for our podcast, tune in for the mini documentaries, as well as I'm dropping one each week. And until next time, everyone, peace, love, and soul.